first project, we're doing a simple accordion fold. So iron your fabric. Mine has already been pre-washed. I'm simply folding it in half and ironing it. You'll want to make sure that your fabric has been pre-washed with soda ash and that you're also using 100% natural fabric. In this case, I'm using cotton. So I want to create some small accordion pleats. It doesn't matter what measurement you use, but I went ahead and gave myself 1-inch marks just so I could keep it quite consistent. You could use larger pleats if you prefer, depending on the size of the fabric. You could do, if you're working in centimeters, for example, this kimono fabric is about 39 centimeters wide, which in inches is about 13.5 inches. And I've made each of my pieces about 18 inches wide. But if you're working with US fabric, if you have 42-inch fabric, you could perhaps use, cut it into fat quarters, 18 by 21. Or if you're working with 60-inch fabric, you could do 20 by 20-inch squares, whatever is an economical use of your fabric, or if you have a project in mind. In my case, I'm just doing them as samples. I don't have a specific project in mind. So I've ironed the pleats, and I'm just going to mark this off as project 1 so I can remember which project is which. And then I'm going to use my ruler again. I'm making approximately every 2-inch marks. I'm using a disappearing marker so that will not show. I'm using rubber bands to clamp it up, to bind it every 2 inches. And you can use twine or string of some kind. It doesn't have to be rubber bands. And you just want to make sure you get them very tight so that will create a resist. This is going to create a striped effect in the final dyeing process. So that's number 1, all done, ready to go. In the second project, we're also doing another folded piece. I'm starting by folding it in half and ironing it. And I'm just creating a simple accordion fold in the horizontal direction, and now I'm folding it in the vertical direction. Again, just doing it by eye, folding not having to measure, but folding it in half, and then creating my accordion going in the other direction. Ironing it again. And this will be called Project 2. Now I am going to use binder clips, just office style binder clips, but you could also use any kind of clips, like if you have a small C clamps, or you have other types of grips for holding, just anything that you might have in your toolbox. I'm being careful not to let the binder clip touch the edge of the fabric because I want the dye to be able to go through and not touch the edges, because that will create a block of white into my design. So you could also use tongue depressors or popsicle sticks to hold this together. That will create a little bit of a striping. These binder clips will also create a white mark, but they'll just be more like small marks. In the third project, we are also creating a accordion fold, folding it in half lengthwise first, ironing again. Also, be sure to cut off any loose strings on your fabric because those can create marks in the dyeing process. So, since those edges are not finished, you're going to get some fraying. The little bit of fraying is fine, but it's any long strings you definitely want to cut off. Again, just doing it by eye and folding it over. Folding it in half again. Now this type of resist, I'm using a very thick chipboard. You can use wood, you can use plastic, plexiglass. If you have something cut, you want the fabric to be a little bit larger than the actual pieces that you're using to block. And I'm using twine to bind this together. You can also use clamps in this case if you don't want the strings to create line work. I've even seen people use like leftover to-go containers made of plastic, as long as it's thick enough to resist. In the fourth project, we're again starting with a fold, and this time we're doing a triangle fold. So just making that perfect triangle and ironing it and folding it over and over and trying to keep the stack going as evenly as you can. And so that came out nice and equal, and I'm marking that as project 4. And then here's where I'm going to bring in my popsicle sticks, or use tongue depressors that you can buy at the pharmacy. Or you could even use chopsticks. Disposable chopsticks are also a good solution. Or just anything that you might have around the house if you don't care about it getting stained with dye. I've used rubber bands to bind those tightly. You can also use twine or clamps. In project 5, this is not really a traditional Shibori project, but I thought it would be just interesting to try. It actually ends up with kind of a cloud-like texture. So I've just rolled my string up and I pulled it super tight so it looks like a scrunchie, and just tie it off. I pulled it as tight as I possibly could. This creates a very subtle kind of wavy look. Project 6, we are doing what I call a handkerchief fold. So I have trimmed this fabric a little bit smaller. I want it intentionally to be a perfect square so that you can do the equal folding. So I'm just bringing up the bottom half and then the top half and bringing them all together so that they're very symmetrical. Ironing it in place and trimming off excess threads. And then flip it over, and then you can either mark this into 4 equal sections or folding it as I've done here by eye. But you're doing an accordion fold with the triangular shape. So if it helps to measure that off into 4 equal spaces, then it might assist you in getting the folding really even. Then what we're going to do is fold it in the other direction, folding it in half. And then again, a horizontal accordion fold in the other direction. And so I've divided it into 4 equal sections in both directions. Then I'm going to use binder clips. And again, you can substitute other types of clips, or you could use the popsicle sticks or tongue depressors or chopsticks to hold those together. And I'm just marking these so I remember again which project is which, 5 and 6. In project 7, we're going to do what's called capping. So you don't have to measure this, you could do it completely by eye, but I wanted 5 caps, so I went ahead and marked the center point and then the centers of the 4 quadrants so that I could get it roughly symmetrical. But you can do it completely by eye if you prefer. I'm doing 5 caps, so I'm going to cut 5 pieces of my string, and I'm just ballparking this 18 inches. I had kind of measured it out by eye first, and so I get my 5 pieces ready. And you can use any kind of object to just kind of create this little pucker for your fabric. So I'm using the end of my pen just temporarily as a way to kind of get a grip on something and able to tie it. So I'm tying my string approximately 3 inches down from the top of the pucker, and I'm using the pen just so I have a placeholder and something to kind of tie to. Then what I'm going to do is remove the pen, and I'm going to wind the fabric around that little 3-inch section, and I'm just going to do it as tightly as possible. There are other variations of this. You can, for example, put plastic wrap, saran wrap, onto that cap before you wind it, and that's going to give you a much larger white area. In this case, this is going to be mostly blue, but wherever there are wherever there are overlapping fabrics or the string, it will leave a white spots, and they kind of look like jellyfish as the final result. So I go ahead and I'm just tying off all 5. You can make them as tall or short as you want. You can make as many as you want. It doesn't have to be in the quadrants. You can make them into a random pattern, whatever you like. And once you're satisfied that you have enough, then cut off all the excess threads, because again, they can create marks on your dyed piece during the dyeing process. So I'm just carefully going around and trying not to nick my fabric. Cut off all those strings. And now this one's ready to dye, and that's what it would look like on both sides. This creates a much more organic result. Our final project, this is called arashi. I don't know all the Japanese names for the previous projects, but this one I know because I've done it in Japan on a much larger dowel. I'm using a PVC pipe here that's 3/4 of an inch by 18 inches long. In Japan, we use very large PVC pipe. They're literally like 5 feet tall and 3 inches in diameter, and we do very large pieces that you would actually be able to make like a tablecloth or a sarong type size. I'm just doing a small sample here. So I'm using a rubber band just to secure it so nothing moves around, but the twine will be the main way to hold it to the pipe. So I'm going to tie it off at the bottom. And get that as tight on there as possible. You could remove the rubber band if you want or leave it. It's near the edge. I usually don't use the edges of my fabric anyway, so I'm not too concerned. And then I'm just winding it around the PVC pipe. And you can use a glass bottle, you could use a broomstick, you could use all kinds of, any kind of cylindrical object, as wide or as long as you want. As long as you don't mind that the dye, it might discolor a broom handle, but glass, it won't hurt glass. So you might find something just around your house. So then you want to tie it off tightly at the top. I'm giving it a double knot, and then you're going to squish down the fabric as hard as you can, as tight as possible. Now we're going into the dyeing process. So I'm using my kitchen sink just with a metal pot that's not going to be hurt by the dye. And the first thing I'm doing is letting my water warm up. I need to let it run for a few minutes to bring it up to a hot temperature. And in the meantime, I'm going to get all my projects wet. You want to always get them wet with water, completely soaked. And they just need to be in there for a few minutes, but I'm letting the water warm up. So I'm letting it run a little bit longer for that reason. And I realized that my arashi is not going to work. I don't want to make a pot of dye. It would waste a lot of dye if I made it that deep. So I'm planning to make just 1 quart of dye, and I'm going to find a taller vessel to dye my arashi project. So I'm just dumping out all the clear water and leaving the wet pieces over to the side. And today I'm going to be using the Dharma Fiber Reactive Dye. It's a powdered dye. I've had good luck with it with lots of different colors. I've used olive green, I've used hot pink, and they come out pretty vibrant. I'm using 4 teaspoons of the powdered dye with 1 quart of water, which is 4 cups of water. So I'm putting the dye in, and I'm measuring out my first 2 cups of water. And the first thing I'm going to do is just pour a small amount of the dye, about a half a cup in, and I'm going to stir and make sure that the powder is completely dissolved. It's much easier to dissolve in a small amount of water, similar to when you, say, make a roux for gravy. You want to, or like a cream sauce, you'll mix your flour with a little bit of water and get it dissolved before you add the full amount of liquid. So same concept. So I'm making sure that it's really, really dissolved so I don't get any crystals directly on my fabric. That can cause dark spots. And then I'm pouring in the rest of my water, and I'm measuring out the additional 2 cups, so that brings it to 1 quart. And I'm going to stir it up and make sure it's very well mixed. Now I'm just going to throw in all my pieces together except for the arashi, and I'm just going to let them soak in the dye. The instructions with the dyes recommended 5 to 15 minutes. I went with just the 5, and I found the dye came out much lighter than I would have really liked, so I would recommend also soaking it for longer. There were also a lot of conflicting information on the internet. I found one instruction that recommended adding soda ash as a binder, and others that recommended using salt, like table salt, and also something called urea. And I didn't do any of those because I'm not planning to wear these as garments, so I'm not really that concerned with the permanency of the dye. I like to just experiment with different shibori techniques, and I usually do small samples that will fit on my scanner. So I'll show you at the end some of my professional projects that I've done with these. So I'm sort of half crafter, half surface designer. So I'm not doing these with the intention of making pillows or actually finished crafts. I'm using them as artwork that I can add to my portfolio. So I transferred the dye to that tall tumbler, and I'm letting the arashi project dye for the 5 minutes. And in the meantime, I'm rinsing out all of the projects several times until the water is quite clear. You want to get as much out of that as you can, because you're then going to be putting this into your washing machine, and you don't want strong dye in your washing machine, believe me. You might accidentally stain your bed linens or something like that. So I'm satisfied with the rinsing process, and now I'm going to just start unclipping everything and show the reveal. So using scissors or whatever tool that you have available. It's a little hard to unfold these with your gloves still on, but I had a fresh manicure just the day before this, so I really didn't want to get my hands stained. So you're getting a peek at what they look like here. And so I get those all separated, throw away all the rubber bands and the leftover string. And now I'm going to throw everything into the washing machine. I washed and dried them and ironed them. And so here now you can see my final projects in order. This is number 1, which was the accordion fold with the rubber bands. This was the accordion fold with the binder clips. This was the one with the cardboard bound all around it. This was the handkerchief fold, the triangle. This was the cloudy one that looked like a scrunchie. And that's another binder one. This is the cap one that looks sometimes called jellyfish. And this is the arashi, which looks like rain or clouds, or rain or clouds. And then here's some examples of what I've done with the Shibori pieces professionally. I have worked in the product design industry for quite a number of years, so I have relationships with company. These were 4 bedding sets that were made. I've also worked with several fashion companies, so here's some women's tops that were made with some of my Shibori pieces. And then here's some where I've changed the color in Photoshop to, other kind of on-trend color palettes, and I've worked with fashion companies to have those produced. I even have stationery. That's in Hebrew because it was produced in Israel. So that's that. And visit me at savvysurfacedesign.com for more information. Thank you.